My name is Bisa, and you know that if something is able to rip me out of my hiatus and make me put together a video post-haste, things have truly hit the fan. Over the past week, the possibly biggest leak of gaming history has taken place. The Nintendo GigaLeak 2 Electric Boogaloo, the Game Freak Teraleak. Now, there is frankly an absurd amount of stuff to talk about here, so before I get into the nitty-gritty, let's cover all the bases, because I've seen a lot of confusion and misinformation floating around this leak, and if we're going to talk about it, I want to clear the air first. For comparison, the Nintendo GigaLeak, which stretched all the way from 2018 to 2022, was a gargantuan leak of anything from source code over documentation and development tools, to finally totaling around 3 terabytes of data. When you compare this new leak, on the other hand, to that, it is downright cataclysmic. Not only is it focused exclusively on Game Freak, the entire leak is over 1 terabyte large, over 300 times larger than the GigaLeak. And the first wave of data alone was larger than it at 4 gigabytes, having grown to almost 50 at the point of writing, just a few days after it started. Most of this is down to the fact that this leak doesn't just contain a lot of text and code, which was the bulk of the GigaLeak and compresses really well, but also a holistic shit ton of images and modern game assets, both of which take up considerably more space. We'll go over what has been currently made public about the leak in a bit, but the leaker has already pledged to not release any of the materials pertaining to future titles to the public, including finished development builds and source code of Legends ZA, as well as a lot of resources for Generation 10 codenamed Gaia, and a new multiplayer-focused title codenamed Synapse. Game Freak have come out and essentially confirmed the legitimacy of the leak, releasing a statement saying that their servers were breached in August, with the names and company email addresses of 2,606 current and former employees and contractors having been leaked. That is all we know about the hack and its circumstances, and this is where I'd like to address one bit of misinformation I've seen floating around a lot. Many people have been going around saying, "Oh, so leaking future games is too far, but doxing thousands of employees is fine?" Prefacing this with saying that obviously breaches like this always suck, and that it's absolutely insane that so many people's personal data has ended up in it. To my knowledge, none of this data has been made public. It's somewhere within the 950 gigabytes that have not seen the light of day, and similarly to future game content, it has been stated that the leaker has no intention of publicizing any of it. However, not to be disingenuous about this, it should very much be noted that there is one exception, that being that the employee whose account was phished did in fact have their name and company email address published as part of an unredacted screenshot of their Nintendo Dev Portal profile, which was included in the public part of the leak to confirm its legitimacy. It sucks, obviously, but it's also not thousands of people's data like some might lead you to think. Now, with all that stuff out of the way, heavy or not, let's actually go over what's in this leak, or at least what has been made public so far. The archives that have been leaked so far can generally be sorted into 3 categories: non-Pokemon Game Freak stuff, code and builds, and internal communications and design documents. In the first category, we have a couple of unfinished experiments from the DS era, an almost complete remake of Game Freak's first ever game, Quincy, for the SNES, an archive full of stuff about their game Harmonite, and most interestingly, full quality scans of the entirety of 24 volumes of the original 1983 Game Freak video game magazine by Satoshi Tajiri and Ken Sugimori, which, for an archivist like me, is obviously a found feast. Next up, and probably what makes up the bulk of the leak both in file size and impact, code and builds. This is where the big bounties lie. 8 archives containing various builds of Black and White 2, X and Y, ORAS, Sun and Moon, Ultra and Not, as well as Pokemon Bank and Poké Transporter, are only the beginning. Included in these parts of the leak are incomplete Git and Subversion repositories for Ultra Sun and Moon and Black and White respectively. The real big guys, however, are the full source code for Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Black and White 2, and Platinum, the last of which also comes with a full Subversion repository, which means not only do we have the source code, but the game's entire development history. Notably, while not having complete source code on its own, the Black and White repository also contains the software development kit used for Platinum and Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which means the source code we have for them can actually be compiled into playable ROMs. It's also been said that the leaker intends to publicize the X and Y, Oraz, and Scarlet and Violet source code soon. However, this hasn't happened at the time of me writing this to my knowledge. And now, to the category that I think is by far the most interesting: internal communications and design documents. This is where pretty much all of what you've seen or heard about that doesn't have to do with the dev builds comes from, and what has the internet the most abuzz. We'll get to those stories. In these parts of the leak, we have internal communications of all kinds. From a developer wiki for Oraz, over technical documentation ranging from Gens 3 to 6, including the Dream World, to internal notes about cancelled and upcoming animation projects. One archive contains promotional artwork, logos, and all other kinds of official artwork in source quality, spanning from Gen 1 to 6. Then one that I feel has gone quite understated, at least outside of artist circles, but that I believe is actually the biggest part of this entire leak, is an archive that brings with it anime concept art and design sheets, including turntables, poses, walk cycles, and color swatches for almost every single Pokémon that has featured in the anime, from the beginning all the way up to Best Wishes. Over 1,000 images of reference material. It is hard to overstate just how freakishly much stuff this is, but it will be a boon to the fandom for countless years to come. And, last but not least, there is an absolute crapload of resources from Gen 3, 4, and 5's development cycles, including, but in no way limited to, the original map editor Game Freak used during both generations 3 and 4. Loads of beta assets for Ruby and Sapphire, design documents for the Gen 5 gym leaders, and the topic that I actually wanted to talk with you all about today. Among all of this assorted data, you can find a folder simply called Pmyth, which contains 26 different stories written as theme studies for Diamond and Pearl's world building, as well as a separate folder containing a whole slew of other design documents concerning it, most interestingly a full transcription of the Arceus Transmutation Circle that you can see in the Sinjo Ruins event in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and when fighting Arceus in PLA. Lockstin has already made a great video explaining it. You should totally go and check it out after this. Now, back to the stories, as these are most likely the ones you've heard the most about. In fact, people have been talking so much about these that the jokes that came from the misinformation surrounding them were driven into the ground within 24 hours after the leaks started. It's truly wild just how unfunny the Pokemon community can be if they really try hard. Though, admittedly, I also made those jokes, so, you know. To put it bluntly, Game Freak wrote a whole-ass Pokemon Bible in every sense of the word. Of these 26 stories, 9 or 8, depending on how you count, are the central stories, with the other 17 or 18 being different kinds and degrees of iterative variations, all built around the two central pillars of Gen 4's lore: the Pokemon world's creation myth, and ancient times when humans and Pokemon lived much closer together. In Pmyth Inomo, for example, a girl gets lost in the woods and is taken in and nursed by a Piloswine in the image of a man. The Piloswine is killed by the girl's father shortly after she had a child during winter. After returning to her village, the girl and her child live alone on the outskirts, being ridiculed by the rest of the village, having Piloswine pelts thrown over them, slowly making the two more and more into Piloswine themselves until they flee into the wilderness. This story has two variations, one where the Piloswine is released by a Slacking, and the one you've probably heard of, where it's replaced by a Typhlosion. Another story is Pmyth Garopu, a story of two hunters that are after Rapidash, one not skilled at the craft but bound by honor, and the other highly adept but ruthless. One day, the first hunter finds a Rapidash and is stopped as it approaches him, asking to become his wife, since if he were to kill it, no more Rapidash would appear on these plains. A few months later, the plains are teeming with Ponyta and Rapidash. Going out, the other hunter finds a female Rapidash and kills it without hesitation, cutting off its mane and wrapping himself in it. Soon after, the first hunter with his Rapidash spots a mane, and after conferring with his wife, decides to kill the Rapidash as it is a male with no children, only to discover that it was the other hunter. Like I said, if you've been on the internet sometime after the leak broke, you've almost certainly heard about these stories, but I frankly really don't like how they've been picked up on, with people going to the full extreme, either making outrageous memes about the Pokemon in these stories being predators, or being upset that Game Freak is full of some kind of furry gooners, when really these are all comparatively tame for mythological stories, and unlike real ones, they almost never become explicit in any way. Really, if anything, this just confirms the age-old meme that Pokemon fans just don't read, which is sad because this is the exact kind of stuff many of us have been asking for. And this kind of reception, being for leaked materials aside, would probably never get something like this again if Game Freak were to actually write something like this in official material. Moving on, beyond the two I outlined, there are a few other stories exploring the themes of unity between nature, humans, and Pokemon, similar to these, featuring Octillery, Slacking, and Ursaring, as well as a fair few variations of them, but I don't want to stretch this video out too much, and I actually really want to cover these in their own videos at some point, so subscribe if that sounds like something you'd be interested in. To me, yet even more interesting, however, is the Pokemon creation myth that is written out here. Essentially as an analog to the Bible's books of Genesis and Revelation, covering both how the world came to be and how it was almost destroyed in ancient times. While we do know a heavily truncated version of this, Arceus' egg appearing in the nothingness, hatching, creating the creation trio, who then go on to make the Pokemon world, we never really got much of anything beyond it. How do the lake spirits come into it? What's with all the other legendaries we know of up to this point, like the Weather Trio or the Reggies? The end time story begins after humanity has begun exploiting the lands of the world well beyond their means, and is fully set in motion after the murder of an Ursaring sends Dialga and Palkia flying into a rage, destroying the entire world along with humanity. Among the few survivors, a child brings the body of the Ursaring up to a mountain, where after praying to a nondescript white god that appeared before it, likely Arceus, the Ursaring's body was reborn as Uxie, its mind as Mesprit, and its heart as Azelf, who flew away into far corners of the land as life returned to it in their wake. As someone who loves both Gen 4 and mythology, this stuff is like crack to me. A never-before-seen degree of insight into the writing development of Pokemon, and a much deeper look into the thoughts that went into the stories we ultimately got to read in the games? I love it. So, to finish this video off, here is a reading of my translation of Pmyth 01.1, the first ever iteration of the Pokemon creation myth.
In the beginning, there was a vortex of chaos. Everything was churning slowly. Everything was vague. At some point, an egg appeared in the center of it all. There, the egg rocked back and forth. At some point, the swell stopped, and the egg rolled over and broke. Arceus, the Absolute, was born. The shards of the shell surrounding it transformed into 16 giants, and one after another they attacked the newly born Arceus. Arceus, however, continued to grow in body, mind, and power. A fierce battle ensued, but at last, Arceus defeated all the giants. Arceus, wounded, decided to create others in its image. The left and right sides of its body looked different, thus it decided to create two different bodies. Arceus gathered the remnants of the giants it had slain and poured its own blood over them. When the body, which resembled its left side, came to life, it filled the area with light. Arceus named him Palkia, God of Space. When the body which resembled its right side came to life, time began to turn. Arceus named her Dialga, god of time. Arceus commanded them to create a world of prosperity and abundance for their people, as it fell into a deep slumber. When Palkia cried loudly, a place flooded with light. After Palkia walked, a glow spread and gently illuminated everything around him. When Dialga roared loudly, time was released there. After Dialga walked, everything began to move slowly with her. A vessel was created there to hold this world. Though the forms of Palkia and Dialga could not be more different, they loved each other and had 3 children. Yuxi, the god of eyes, Mesprit, the god of minds, and Azelf, the god of hearts, were born. When Yuxi awoke, all things appeared there. Shapes and colors came to be. When Mesprit wished, everything was felt there. A sense of calm spread. When Azelf shouted, everything trembled there. A happy tone began to echo. To the 3, Palkia and Dialga gave the seed of life and commanded them to nurture it. As the 3 prayed in a circle around it, the seed sprouted. The sprout grew and grew, eventually becoming a giant tree of life. However, this tree of life, which never stopped growing, soon filled every space, and even the gods could no longer move. The 3 of them had no choice but to cut down the tree. Thus, Yuxi wrapped its body around it, and Mesprit and Azelf slammed their bodies into it. Soon the tree collapsed and shattered into 3 pieces. The 3 prayed again, lamenting that the tree of life would rot away. Then 3 deities appeared from the fragments. Rayquaza, god of the sky, Groudon, god of the earth, Kyogre, god of the ocean. As the 3 deities roared, the shattered tree of life transformed into the sky, the earth, and the sea, respectively. Rayquaza transformed into the very pillar that holds up the heavens. Its shadow, soaring through the sky, became the god who sustains the heavens, Dragonite. The air filled the sky, and the stars twinkled. Groudon transformed into a slab of stone that covered the earth. Its roar, diving into the stone, became a god who sustains the earth, called Tyranitar. The earth quaked, and the mountains stirred. Kyogre transformed into a vein of water from which sprung the sea. Its ripples, disappearing into the great fathoms, became Gyarados, the god who sustains the oceans. The waters filled the sea, and the waves whispered. And thus, the world was born. Palkia, Dialga, and the other gods rejoiced greatly, and let the world be inhabited by their children. The world was peaceful, a paradise for the children of God. The children of God continued to multiply. Little by little, their power, their language, changed. In time, the gods began to call those who lived in the world by 2 names. The children of the god who resembled the great father Palkia were called Pokémon. The children of the god who resembled the great mother Dialga were called humans. Once Arceus, the Absolute, awakens, it will see this world and be content, bringing prosperity and abundance upon it yet again. Cool. I hadn't actually read this yet. Very cool. I got so many things to work on.